My name is Patience Murray. I'm a Pulse nightclub shooting survivor. Pulse nightclub had the best reviews. It had the best pictures. It was only $10 to get in, so that was pretty much a no-brainer for us. We're going to stay here for the rest of the night. And we did. We were really carefree. Like we were just carefree having the best time. It was 1:58 a.m. and we had just danced the entire night away. We were getting ready to go home. That's when the sounds of what sounded like gunshots were going off. Everything started moving so fast after that. After hearing it, it was like chaos. None of us had ever really experienced gun violence. So when we heard it, for me, it shocked me to the point where I just wanted to drop to the floor. And I remember Tiara, she ran towards the bar and she was like squatting by the bar. I literally do not understand or know how, but I just ended up outside, like on the ground. And I remember Akira running towards me. It looks like it's time to go. Where's Tiara at? And Akira said, she's still inside. I said, we got to go get her. Akira goes right back inside. I get up. I go back inside. Tiara is still there at the bar squatting. But at this point, it was just complete chaos at that point. You could hear people screaming. It was just like a morph of like sounds and terror. But when we got to Tiara, we didn't know what to do, but we saw everybody going to the bathrooms and we just decided to run where everybody was going. And we were the last few to go into the bathroom stall that we were in. It's almost shocking that we were even able to make it back in the way that we did and to make it into the bathrooms the way that we did without being shot sooner. There are about 20 people. In the beginning, it was just a lot of confusion because we were literally just having the best night of our life. And now it was like some sick, twisted game was happening. In the beginning, I just felt like, is this what a club does to get their people out at closing time? Then when we saw this woman sitting on the floor, holding her arm, bleeding in the middle of all of us in this bathroom, and we were asking her, like, what happened to you? What happened to you? And she was saying, I've been shot. I've been shot. It just wasn't registering in that moment. We just could not believe what she was saying. And until we heard the feet of the gunman come into our bathroom, that's when it became clear, once he started firing in our bathroom, that this was real. We were in a handicap stall in the bathroom and the door was closed. There were two other stalls next to us, but he was residing in the area, just like in the open space. When he was actually firing his gun, it was unclear as to how he was doing it because it was just everything flying everywhere. It was just a nightmare. These are real bullets. This is a real gunman. This is a real hostage situation. This is real blood. We've really been shot. Are we going to make it out of here? This fun night had just took a drastic turn. It's literally by the grace of God that his gun jammed because I don't think he would have ever stopped. Right after his gun jammed, I remember hearing Akira getting on the phone immediately, calling her parents. And I remember her saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Just countless people kind of like groaning in pain and some people screaming. At the time, I was still in shock because I couldn't believe that, number one, that just happened. And number two, I had looked down and I saw blood pouring out of my leg. It was beginning to register to me that I had been shot. My leg was in excruciating pain. And I realized how painful it was that I could barely move anything because I couldn't believe it. When I was looking under the stall and I could see lifeless bodies over the toilet in the other stall, I could also see the gunman's automatic rifle. That was the moment when I felt like I would never get out of there. After that pause of him dealing with his jammed gun, people making calls, there was a moment where he said, get off your phones. And at that point, everybody had to stop talking on the phones. That's when that 3-hour wait period started. So we never actually got out of the club until 3 hours later when the police intervened. Throughout that entire time, he would be speaking directly to us. He'd be pacing around. He'd be cracking open the stall door. doing things to torment us in a way. After the first 2 hours, I had already lost complete hope. At that point, I was praying. So it started to get really silent. And every single passing second was terrifying. There was a point while we were waiting, while we were being held hostage, that he was speaking to someone on the phone. And he said that he had enough bombs in his car to blow up the city block. At that point, I didn't know if I was more afraid of being blown up to pieces or being shot again. Literally, it wasn't until 3 hours later that we heard finally some noise and commotion going on. It began with a couple loud noises. And at the time, we didn't understand what those loud noises was. So we actually thought that it was the bombs that he said that he had. But it was actually the police coming into the club. After the first two loud noises, we heard the police outside of our bathroom. Like, we heard them on the other side of the wall outside of the entire club, but they were right beside our bathroom. We heard them say, "Move away from the walls." The gunman heard the police and entered into our bathroom stall completely. All we heard him say was, "Hey, you." He pulled the trigger and shot someone. He said, "Hey, you," again. He pulled the trigger and shot another person. At this point, I could literally feel his presence, but the person laying next to me, he got closer to me, and I felt like his breath in my ear. And then he shot again. And I heard the guy next to me like scream, like so loud in my ear. And that's when the police came through the wall, literally in the nick of time, and started exchanging gunfire with the gunman until they killed him. And after that, it was completely silent because the wall debris fell over all of us on that side. So I had to literally take everything off of my face, the cement, all of it. The only people that were sitting up was myself, Tierra, and one other person. And then they finally came in and they pointed to me and said, "Can you get up and walk?" But at this point, we're so focused on Akira. Akira was the only one that I heard earlier. She was on the phone. That was the last time I had heard her. The last thing I remember her saying on the phone was, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die." There was points during our time in that 3 hour period where I would feel Tierra tapping my leg to see if I was still alive. And I would kind of like raise my hand a little bit just to give her a signal that I'm still here. And then at the very end, we all sit up, but Akira didn't. And she's laying over Tierra's lap, lifeless. What's wrong with Akira? What's wrong with Akira? So we're kind of losing it at this point. But the guy who was in the bathroom with us, who didn't get shot at all this entire time, he was level-headed enough and clear-headed enough to check her pulse. And he told us that she still had a pulse. At this point, all I knew is that I've been shot. I'm in a lot of pain. Don't know if I can get up. And I kept trying and I just couldn't do it. My friend at the time, Tierra, she said, "You have to get up. You have to get up." Somebody pulled me from underneath my underarms and dragged me through the grass and then put me on the back of a truck. And that's when we were rushed to an ambulance, and then the ambulance was rushed to the hospital. So from that point on, I didn't know what happened to Tierra and Akira, because once they took me out of there, they took me straight into surgery. I knew that Tierra was in another hospital, but we did not know what the status of Akira was. It was a lot of weird stuff going on. A lot of families were getting answers, and then Akira's family was looked at hospital to hospital, and it was still nothing. And then they just had to wait. But then they were finally notified officially that Akira did not make it. I didn't find out until Tierra was discharged from her hospital, and her mom and her came over to my hospital room. She had the sling in her arm, and she was sitting down next to my hospital bed. And then her mom sat down right on my bed. I was asking, basically like, "I'm happy to see you, Tierra, but where's Akira?" That moment again. And that's when Tierra's mom turned to me and said, "Akira didn't make it." I felt this sense of guilt instantly, because at the time she was the younger one. She was 18, I was 20. I felt like there was some sense of like, maybe I should have been smarter or had some sort of other plan in place that wouldn't have gotten to this point. So I just instantly started beating myself up. And it wasn't until Akira's mom came into my room and said, "If it was any one of you in the club, the both of you would have went back in for the other, so you don't have to feel guilty for saying go back in. It's still, even to this day, it's the moments where it's just like, why did it have to go like that? Like, why did she have to be, why did she have to be the one to not make it? Immediately after the shooting, I was just watching the news, watching the names roll at the screen, and the numbers just kept rising and rising. And it became more surreal to me that I couldn't even believe that I was just there. My nurse had brought me a little pink floral journal with a little pen attached to it. And she encouraged me to write. I just remembered, opening up the floral journal, just not really knowing what to say. And then the words just came, the guilt of feeling grateful to be alive is heavy. The guilt of feeling grateful to be alive is heavy. Wanting to smile about surviving, but not sure if the people around you are ready. As the world mourns the people killed and viciously slain, I feel guilty screaming about my legs in pain because I could feel nothing, like the other 49 who weren't so lucky to feel this pain of mine. That poem that I wrote in the hospital, that started my healing journey. Like many other things that I experienced in my life, I internalized it and moved on. And although that's not something that I recommend other people doing, I do feel like I should have went to therapy. I do feel like I should have taken therapy very seriously. During that time, I met a guy. His name is Alex. He was actually Akira's brother. I don't know how this guy is able to, actually sustain and maintain after this. But for some reason, he was very interested in me. He just cared about making sure that I was okay. I allowed him into my healing journey. I allowed him into my heart. And we ended up falling in love. That love, even as painful as it was at some time, was a major factor that gave me hope to think about the future, to think about moving forward, and to not just focus on all of the memories, the horrible nightmares. So he was a huge part. Alex and I ended up getting married, and we are still married to this day, and he's still the love of my life. But that relationship right after the shooting, it was definitely filled with lots and lots of ups and downs. And that love at that time was painful for some people to watch happen because it was during such a sensitive time. It was not received well in the beginning. Years later, everybody's more understanding now. But at the time, it just was not the right time. The one thing that I have to say to anybody that's going through their own healing journey is to be gentle with yourself. Even though you accept the journey that you've been on and the painful experiences that you've been through, you don't have to necessarily make that a part of your identity forever. And you get to decide who you want to be. Your painful experiences, what you've been through, isn't necessarily the label that you have to live with for the rest of your life. I'm not a victim. That implies I'm still broken. I'm not a survivor. That implies I'm barely getting by the best I can. I'm a champion because I faced extreme challenges and succeeded. So call me champion. My name is Patience Murray. I'm a Pulse nightclub shooting survivor to champion, and thank you so much for listening.